Welcome back to Alpha Mama episode 2 for 2024. Today I am tuning in from my car, believe it or not. The weather is mental at the moment. It was a beautiful muggy day yesterday. It's been really warm weather, and then suddenly we've been hit by intense rain, flash flooding. So it's been a really interesting morning. So on today we are talking about Patrick Mckeown's book called The Oxygen Advantage. So I was thinking about self-discipline and cultivating self-discipline in your life, and I think one of the most basic places where we can start, one of the most the simplest places where we can start developing or cultivating self-discipline in our lives, it actually has to do with breathing. So breathing is something that we all do every day. Every minute of every day we're breathing oxygen. You know, we talk about how you can go without water for a few days, you can go without food for a few weeks. But when it comes to oxygen, oxygen is something that supplies our brains and nourishes our survival day in, day out, every day. And so it's really quite critical. But how many of us are doing that consciously, I guess? So obviously, you know, we all breathe without thinking about it. But Patrick Mckeown, who wrote this book, The Oxygen Advantage, is like a world leader in performance exercise, which is something, obviously, I'm focusing on self-discipline this year. I really want to build really, really good foundational skills for self-discipline in my life. And I think breathing's the right place to start. So this is the right podcast for the beginning of this series. So it's a little bit, I was actually quite, I found it quite eye-opening listening to this. Someone recommended this book to me in terms of building performance exercise. I do a lot of running, and I'm actually a mouth breather when I run. So I tend to breathe through my mouth and like a gulp big, large chunks of air. And my partner and I did a run just a couple of days ago, a fun run, 10K fun run. And so I started trying to put some of these techniques into practice. I was just taking it really easy and basically closing my mouth while I ran. And trying to, as much as possible, breathe through my nose. And I did actually find that even in that small amount of time, and I'm going to continue practicing, obviously, it made what I felt like was a significant difference to my run. So Patrick's like a world-class performance expert, and his specialization is breathing, and the Oxygen Advantage takes you through basically his hypothesis or his explanation as to why he thinks you should do this technique of breathing. In his book, he asserts basically that we chronically overbreathe, that in the past, historically, humans weren't naturally mouth breathers, they were nose breathers, and the only time that people ever breathed through their mouth was when they were when caveman was in like a fight or flight state, and they were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or whatever else. And so he puts forward the assertion that when we breathe through our mouth, what we're actually doing is we're triggering a subconscious fight or flight state as a heightened state of anxiety in our body. So we're sort of sending ourselves subconsciously stress messages that we're in stress or de-stress when we breathe through our mouth. So I found that really interesting. And so how can you tell if you are a chronic overbreather? Well, if you breathe through your mouth and not your nose on a regular basis, then you're probably a chronic overbreather. The other one that is a dead giveaway is if you snore, then apparently you're a chronic overbreather. So they're all really interesting ways to work out whether you breathe too much, which sounds crazy. Like, how could you possibly breathe too much? But Patrick explains in his book that the reason why breathing through your mouth is, or why taking in too much oxygen is actually bad for you, is because apparently in order for the oxygen that we breathe to get into our blood flow, so to have this, it's like a hemoglobin trigger, it's actually triggered by the levels of carbon dioxide in your body rather than the levels of O2 or oxygen. And so if you're breathing too much oxygen in, you're actually preventing the trigger from occurring that needs the oxygen to get to all of your organs throughout your body. So by breathing less, but breathing in a more quality controlled fashion through your nose, you're actually increasing the amount of blood flow through the higher levels of carbon dioxide in your body to go into your bloodstream and then spread throughout your organs, which is fantastic. So that's a real eye-opener for me, and something I never realized was a thing until I came across this book. So very, very interesting. And so I guess the question is, if the quality of your breath dictates how much carbon dioxide gets into your body and oxygen, which then dictates how much oxygen gets into your bloodstream and travels around, how do we do that? Like, how do we improve our breathing? So what Patrick suggests is to actually close your mouth, breathe through your nose. But when you're breathing through your nose, he suggests breathing lightly and deeply. So not breathing hard, not taking big breaths. And he refers to, the ancient Taoists basically teaching their disciples that when you breathe, you should breathe so lightly that not even a hair follicle moves in your nostril. So the idea is to gently breathe in, but breathe in very deeply. And through this practice, we should be assured that over time, through practice, we will increase the amount of oxygen flow through our bodies, and we will increase the rhythm of our diaphragm and improve our overall health. So one technique would be to breathe. So just to breathe in for 6, hold for 1, and then breathe out for 8. And another thing that Patrick also suggests to assist you with practicing breathing throughout the night. Now, I'm not a medical practitioner by any stretch of the imagination, so do not take my advice. Get some advice from a professional before you do this, or use your judgment. But he suggests getting medical tape and actually taping your mouth at night to sort of force yourself to breathe through your nose at night. Obviously, don't do this to children, or if you've got respiratory issues, or if you've been drinking or have any other issues with using your nose. But that is just one of Patrick's recommendations, so I'm just sharing that with you. It's not something that I've tried yet, but I'm keen to give it a go, because I've always been a chronic mouth breather. Unfortunately, like, I've got a lactose intolerance, and so when I was growing up, no one knew I was lactose intolerant, and I literally couldn't breathe through my nose ever. Throughout my whole childhood, I always had a blocked up nose, and so I became, just by nature, a chronic mouth breather. And so now, in this very late time of my life, I'm now looking to shift my habits and become an amazing, fully fledged nose breather and change my breathing, change my life, basically. So, yeah, that's something interesting, worth checking it out. So the book's called The Oxygen Advantage. Patrick also has, so he's got a pretty cool Irish accent. He's also got a podcast called The Oxygen Advantage. I strongly recommend that you read it, listen to the podcast or check it out. I've been listening to episodes of that, and I find it super fascinating. You know, hearing stories of people who have changed their lives through just simply shifting from being mouth breathers to nose breathers. I think there was one guy who was on there not long ago. He's now a performance coach for a lot of professional athletes in Europe. But he was talking about how he had grown up doing like wrestling, and then I think he became a professional wrestler. And by the age of 47, he was like having organ failure and like all these chronic health issues. And then in the process of that, basically, he came across this nose breathing technique, and he's now completely converted. He spent the last 6 years like completely focusing on nose breathing,